When mortal folk create, they imbue their creations with something of themselves, a vestige of the divine spark inherited from the gods and the abiding hope that what they create will serve an important purpose. When crafting objects are abandoned, forgotten, or cast aside, they are robbed of their purpose. The usually quiet spirits that reside in these things shudder to life, drawing other discarded objects together to form a shape-shifting mass. This impostor assumes the form of a harmless object, waiting to steal its purpose back from mortals. Impostors are animated by resentment toward mortal folk who so casually discarded them. The impostor disguises itself and waits for mortals to return. When they do, the impostor lures them in with its predatory mimicry, revealing its true monstrous form only when it's too late for the prey to escape. An impostor might devour its victim, but that's not its true goal. What the impostor wants is to reclaim its original purpose through an act of revenge. The world is rife with abandoned, forgotten items. No matter the reason, folk have forsaken these objects. Farmers fleeing in the face of a blight, a deposed warlord whose palace has since slid into the sea, miners who left a cavern when the gold ran out. The things left behind there can rise up as impostors. Not only can impostors serve as potent guardians of the places in which they lurk, they can also serve as a pained, living memory of how the world once was. No mere undead ghoul, the Lich is a once living creature that chose undeath as a path to immortality. A highly intelligent and powerful wielder of magic, the Lich bound their soul to an object, tabula de fictionis. So long as the object persists, so too will the Lich. Their body destroyed, their empire in ruins, their capacity for fellowship withered away. The Lich will endure the ages alone, pursuing inscrutable plans on timescales mortals cannot comprehend. For the Lich, eternal life is merely a means to an end. The Lich covets time, the time necessary to achieve a purpose that few dare dream of. Every form of the Lich will have its own unique endgame, but each of these goals shares a common trait: the need for more time than a single mortal life can afford. Untold ages ago, as part of their schemes, the Lich planted ancient religions and arcane traditions in the mortal world. The Lich has been known by a myriad of cursed names throughout history, but they are now largely forgotten. Soon, however, the world will remember. Whenever the Lich reemerges into the world, they will quickly gather a cult that hopes, perhaps in vain, for an eternal reward from their overlord. Two different excerpts from Monstrous, from Cloud Curio, LLC, by Kyle Latino, Henry Webb, Sally Tamarkin, and Amber Seeger. Welcome to this episode of I Am the Party, and I am Paul. Wanted to start with these readings today because I've been thinking a lot about how solo RPGs are a thing of isolation. I don't want to say loneliness. Loneliness is too strong of a word. It can be lonely, but also I think the space of loneliness provides an opportunity for creativity that I don't necessarily feel that I can get when I either run or play in standard multi-person RPG, at the table, online, whatever it might be. I've been thinking also a lot how the concept of solo RPGs is so vague, and I've been working through my own understanding of what it means to play in a solo RPG. I mentioned in one of my first episodes about the idea that everything is play from the Solo RPG Game Master's Guide, and I still feel very strongly that that is true. But that being said, it's a foundational aspect, but I'm trying to build myself up, build up more of an idea of what else is true about solo RPGs. And when I say true, I mean true to me. This is one of those areas where it is absolutely objective truth is not really going to be present. Every solo RPG, I believe, is firmly its own game, and it's made by its own game designer. So when I say true, I mean true for me. One of the other things that I've found to be true for me is that when I do play, whether it's the time that I spend recording myself or all of the time that I spend not recording myself, but thinking about what's my next episode going to be like, it's playing the role of both player and GM. Seems kind of obvious, but I think a lot of games, journaling games, don't necessarily have that GM role. I shouldn't say that because I haven't really done a lot of journaling games, but my understanding, the way that I kind of think about journaling games is that it's very much set up and structured for a player rather than a player or GM to be taking part in it. Could be wrong. Happy to be corrected on that. That being said, why did I pick those two, the opening readings of entries from this book, Monstrous, which is one of the coolest covers of any book that I've ever had. I kickstarted it. I'm a huge fan of just like system agnostic bestiaries, monster guides, whatever you want to call it. And this was one that was from originally a YouTuber. It was originally a Kickstarter from, at least one of the main creators is, like I mentioned in the beginning, Kyle Latino, whose YouTube channel, I call it a station, radio station on YouTube, is called Map Crow, MAP space CROW, and I love his videos. They're so inspirational. I love his style of art. It's slightly cartoonish when he's drawing maps, but it's all isometric, and just seeing his like free flow of ideas, it's very inspirational. So I knew when he was part of this Kickstarter, either the contributor or the founder of the Kickstarter, I wanted to be able to support him financially. And also I knew I was going to get a good product. And so I picked this up. I think it was delivered sometime last year, and I wasn't quite sure about it. I kind of bought it sight unseen, so it's just like, I like the YouTuber quite a lot, and I know I'm going to, if nothing else, appreciate the art. It's each of the sections of this bestiary, it's like divided up. Dragon, imposters, liches, imposters and liches, that's what I just read from. But there's large categories, mobs. That's interesting. I haven't looked through this closely enough. Outsiders. And then within each of these categories, you get like some example creatures. Along with the examples, you get like some good generators, some inspiration for creating these creatures. And it's all, like I said, system agnostic. So it's really easy to run it. And I think especially run it in a solo RPG setting, because you can just take the qualities rather than the quantified numbers and stats and just roll with it. Imposters and Liches, not just because they're alphabetical, although that didn't hurt things. I picked these two to share kind of the opening thematic aspects that I read about, because I think they both have a lot to do with that concept of loneliness I was starting to talk about in solo RPGs. And the imposter one really spoke to me because of abandonment. That's, wow, didn't mean to go that deep on it, but the idea of like imposter items, objects that like we as sentient creatures put our hearts and souls into and find value in. Eventually those will be abandoned, and eventually modern day they end up in the dump somewhere far or not too far away from us, but they go somewhere when we pass or when we don't need them anymore. But thinking about like just clutter and junk that could stay around in a fantasy setting, for example, and would just kind of be forgotten in time. This whole idea of the imposter being something that had someone valued, somebody loved this thing, whatever it might be, and now nobody does. And it's taken, but it still feels that connection and is seeking out a new connection with somebody. So I thought that was really interesting, and it spoke maybe again too much into my own psyche about podcasting in general. I'm podcasting on my own here, just solo. It's a solo project all around. It's just me, no producer, it's no sound engineer, which you'll be shocked by, I'm sure. Yeah, so imposters are really interesting in this book. And then to kind of coincide with that, and then maybe the theme overall here is like the passage of time, because that Lich entry, the opening of it really spoke to me in the idea of the line where the goals far surpass the limits of a normal human lifespan. And so the Lich is all about trying to capture as much time for itself as possible. Now, to bring it all back to my most recent episode last week, where I did that tarot reading, which I'm still thinking about. That's still baking in the oven on like how much that has impacted my idea for like where this story is going. That tarot reading really gave me some great thoughts and some parameters about what the hell in our empire, where my characters are from and who they work for, ostensibly, kind of the state of that empire that's on the other side of this mountain range, the Dagger Spine Mountains, and why they are now to the east of the mountains and what kind of is out there. More specifically, why my stewards were sent there. I think that has to do with the GMing side more than anything. It helped me do a lot of world building very quickly to do that tarot reading for Sarge, and it's given me so many ideas. I was really stuck, I'll be honest, after episode 4, where I was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this dungeon crawl. But now I'm very thankful for Rift of the Seeping Night. Spoilers for what's coming, and I'll actually play it out. But I don't imagine that my stewards are going to spend much more time in the Rift of Seeping Night as a dungeon. It ended up not being totally exactly what I was looking for from a play experience. It's still a super cool dungeon, but I have kind of used it as like a campaign seed overall. So you'll probably see some of that come up in this episode. But enough preamble. Let's jump in. Where I left off before, our 4 stewards of the Halinar Empire, Sarge, Sax, Deadlock, and Talls, they are pretty deep into this wizard, the wizard Baltothum's temple, his study area, his mansion, his apartments, whatever you want to call it. And it being a wizard's place, there's obviously weird, quirky things that they've encountered, but they've made their way up through what ended up being the passageway that led upwards into a well that they climbed a chain, but it was harrowing, we'll say that, because there's a massive sea of darkness and was just off to their left as they climbed this chain and then appeared up onto this plateau above the sea of darkness. I'm going to read a description here of the plateau of the primordial well. The stewards now stand on a large ovular stone plateau rising high up from a seemingly bottomless pit below. There is a large well in the center of the plateau with a heavy crank mechanism attached to a chain that disappears down it. Again, this is what my characters just climbed out of. East of the well is a sundial and a translucent off-white orb laying on the ground nearby. At the far eastern precipice of the plateau, only about a foot away from the edge, spirals a huge, brilliantly illuminated shaft of water. To the west, there is a thin natural land bridge extending far into the darkness. The stewards now are taking a moment. Sarge did have their flashback to that tarot reading from last episode as they just kind of gather their thoughts. And the stewards have moved a little bit slowly, a little bit intentionally through this. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that they did lose Bellerophon, who was their basically their chaplain for their squad priest, and they're all still coping with that loss, with that trauma. None of them are too eager to get into the next fight, cross some danger that they don't need to cross. Talls, as squad mage, she is looking around and she checks out the sundial. And there's an inscription along the edge of the sundial that reads, "The light of day shines upon its supplicants." And this is a recurring theme. That's also a quote from one of the statues that they ran into earlier. The whole temple and the city of Spire itself, or this little village of Spire, I should say, in the mountains, they worship the sun. They're worshippers of lights. Something has gone wrong. Talls is starting to get a terrible feeling that where the hell did Baltothum go? Why has he been missing for so long? And why was there this great spiraling, whirling well of darkness that they had to cross to get up into this plateau in the first place? And then she looks around and she notices that none of them, including herself, are looking off to the west. And the west leads to a very thin land bridge. And I'm picturing kind of like the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, that kind of a thing. But it would take them directly over this black, spirally, oily chasm of nothingness, and none of them are looking in that direction. One of the other exciting updates, exciting to me at least, is that I switched over to Karn. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. I rolled up some characters, stats I should say, for my characters that already exist, using the Karn Second Edition Player's Guide. And so I'm going to make a roll here. Talls specifically is trying to force herself to look in the direction of this dark cavern. And so using Karn, kind of interpret this as a save check. Using Will as a kind of obvious one here to force herself. She has a stat of 12, and so I'm going to roll a d20. In Karn, if I get a 12 or lower, then it's successful. I rolled a 15. So she thinks to herself, I have to look over there. But she can't. She kind of averts her face, and she walks over to Sarge and taps them on the shoulder. We got to get out of here, Sarge. Sarge, still lost in that memory of the tarot reading, shakes it off, and they look at Talls. What are you talking about? And Talls puts herself between Sarge and the chasm, but facing away from the chasm. I think we need to get out of here now. Deadlock, who I kept their motivations, and Deadlock's motivation is power. He picks up this orb that was on the ground. It's a translucent off-white orb, and he pockets it, and he tries to look in the direction. So he's east of them, of the two of them that were talking. And he tries to look in the direction and finds that it's also a struggle to just even face that direction. I'm going to have Deadlock roll Will as well, and he has a 14. Ooh, I rolled a 1. That's a critical success. I'm going to choose to make... I don't know if it's actually a critical success, but yeah, it's a 1. Rolling low in Karn is good. So I rolled a 1. Deadlock has this orb. I don't know if it's the orb itself that fills him with courage, or feels like he can press forward, but he looks in their direction, and his eyes go large, and even though he's looking into this vast darkness that's directly behind Sax and Talls, his pupils contract as if it's so bright, but there's nothing to see there at all. And he's starting to hear something like a whirling sound. Almost sounds like a weeping noise, like crying and mourning is in mourning. And as he slides the translucent orb into his backpack, his rucksack that he's carrying on his back, he looks up and says, "Does anyone else hear that?" And Talls looks at Sarge again and says, "We need to leave now." Sarge now for the first time is going to look up and also try to look at Talls, who again is between them and the orb, or them and the sphere of darkness, this sea of darkness that they're starting to realize is kind of starting to move into this space. They're all getting this feeling. And Sarge has a will of 13. Rolled a 13, so we just got it. It's equals or less then. Sarge looks up and nods without speaking and stands up, instinctively pulling their longsword kind of loose in the scabbard to make sure that it's ready if they need it. Finally, Sax looks around as well and is going to attempt to look in the direction of where everyone else is. And Sax has an 8 willpower. I rolled a 15 again. Sax starts to slowly move and like kind of slide away from this cliff edge where the darkness is. Doesn't try to draw any attention to herself. She's kind of sneaking away. As she's doing so, her motivation was grief. She starts to hear the mourning and the crying, and it definitely speaks to her. She's pulled back towards the darkness in this space that seems to be encroaching, and even as Sarge and Talls and Deadlock all seem to be backing away, where once Sax was moving away, she starts to make her way without being able to like see what she's moving towards. She's still drawn towards it, and she believes that the crying, this mourning sound, sounds very familiar. It could be, in fact, Bellerophon. There's something in it that makes Sax think that it's Bellerophon who's crying, and he's lost in this darkness. We have to go in there. All 3 of the other stewards look at Sax and are shocked. All 3 of them have been like, "No, we got to get out of here. Let's go back down in this well, climb down this chain. Let's get out. The wizard be damned. Balta Thum is lost." That's what they're all kind of thinking together, is like, this mission is going bad real quick. But Sax, without hesitation and without looking, leaps off of the ledge of this plateau and into the darkness. As she's leaping, Sarge is going to reach out and try to make a quick grab, hold her back, and I'm going to use a strength save on this, and Sarge has a 12 strength. Rolled a 10, so as Sarge grabs Sax and pulls her away from this darkness, I'm going to have Sax actually roll a resisting strength, and so she has a 9, whereas Sarge is 12, and I roll a 10 for Sarge. If I roll a 10 or lower, I'm going to say that Sax, or actually it'd have to be a 9 because a 10 would be a fail. So if I roll any success for Sax, her success is going to be lower than Sarge's, which is a more powerful success. We'll see what happens. Rolled a 17. So Sax is definitely pinned down by Sarge, and Sarge kind of shakes her and says, "What are you doing? Get a hold of yourself." And Deadlock starts to hear the mourning as well, and the grief noise that's coming up from this darkness, and the darkness now has moved into half of the room. It's actually overtaken the well itself. The room gets all of a sudden completely covered in darkness. Deadlock, who had grabbed the orb, he's the only point of light, and it's coming from his rucksack. Talls quickly just grabs the orb out from his backpack, and it's again the only source of light. And they now, with the orb out, they can see a small space around them, but there's no features in this space anymore. And all of a sudden they look down, and they can hear their footsteps. There's a small level of water that has filled this space, but this space itself there's no walls. There's just no dimension exactly to this space. It's just a huge open cavernous area, which is just completely changed from where they just were. And they all hear the mourning sound. They all hear what sounds to be now kind of quieting whimpering. They have no idea what to do, and Sarge looks over to Talls, who's holding that orb and it's glowing, and says, well, what do you think? We go towards the mourning, towards the crying, or we go away from the crying? Those are our two options that I can see. I'm open to suggestions. Anyone see anything else that we can do? And Sarge is whispering, and the whisper goes not very far at all. It's hushed almost immediately, and they can barely hear them. Talls just walks forward and hands Sarge the orb and says, you're the boss. Boss, you tell us what to do. And Sax, again, now free from Sarge's grip, starts to walk towards the mourning, the whimpering, the crying sound that's in front of them. And the water is just like the only noise that anyone can hear as Sax sloshes her way through. Quickly, Sarge catches up to her, and Deadlock and Talls follow them. And they start walking towards, and they can see a brief, like a glimpse of an outline of a figure who's sitting, looks to be on finally some kind of a little bit of a feature of like a sandbar in the middle of a vast body of water that's only a little bit deep, maybe up to 6 inches at times, and it's unsteady, but other than that, it's just a black morass that surrounds them. Again, the orb is glowing. It's the only source of light that they have with them, and it does not reach very far. They approach this figure, and it seems to be robed with a hood drawn over it. There's just no features other than, like, it could just be a rock essentially on top of another rock or a log or something like that. But they walk towards it. Suddenly, for the first time that they've been able to see, this thing moves as if it's caught them moving towards it, and they've caught its attention. So it looks at them from across an expanse that actually seems to be shrinking, even though they're not really moving closer to this entity. And a voice that none of them recognizes says, I've been waiting for someone for so long to come. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Pretty excited about this. I have what I hope to be a fun idea of who this dude is. Sorry, it's a dude. Spoiler. it's an entity. It's a being. But here we go. We're off to the races. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again soon.